It's officially been 1 week since Bitcoin made its all-time high around $123,000. Since then, we have just continued to consolidate inside of a range where altcoins are now getting some relief, as we covered in my previous videos. Fed Chair Jerome Powell just got referred for criminal charges as I'm recording this video today. Today we'll be talking about this, going over the Bitcoin price action, going over the altcoin market, and of course, touching on the news as it pertains to this industry. If you enjoy the content, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe. Let's jump right into the video. As we normally do, let's kick us off with a little bit of Bitcoin. What just happened? So, taking a look at the Bitcoin price action, you can see that we are still within this bull flag that we've been covering on the channel at length. We had a massive breakup to $123,000 last week on Monday, and now we have since consolidated. So, what I am looking at here is, first of all, the point of control of this range, which is found right around 117.8K. You can see that more recently on the 4-hour time frame, and if I go on the 1-hour time frame, we have been holding this level as support, which is ultimately very positive. However, whenever we get to the top of this range, it starts acting as resistance, especially around the value area high. But on the flip side here, if we take a look at the value area low, which is this yellow line on the chart, you can see that it is holding as support, coinciding exactly with 116 to 116.5K. These are the levels that I'm looking at. Now, my expectation here is that Bitcoin will likely move out of this range and it will be a breakout to the upside. Let's see how things develop, but so far I have no reason to think that we're just going to start melting much lower. What I would be expecting here is some further consolidation, and as we get the consolidation, that is when altcoins likely continue to outperform Bitcoin, as we've been covering on the channel. We talked about it since over here, that altcoins would likely be outperforming Bitcoin until we get the next big breakout for Bitcoin, and this is when I think Bitcoin dominance could be reversing. And speaking of Bitcoin dominance, as you can see here, we had a very nice weekly close for altcoins. A massive red candle for Bitcoin dominance, naturally very positive for the altcoin market measured against Bitcoin. However, you can see that this did happen time and time again, and right now, I still think that when Bitcoin makes its next big move, this is when Bitcoin dominance will likely pick up. But as I shared in yesterday's video and the prior ones, as long as we stay within this range, there is no reason not to think that altcoins will continue to outperform Bitcoin. It's only when we get the next leg higher that this could be shifting. And for those of you that really like simplifying the charts, let me just show you where we are for Bitcoin. If I connect all of the tops from the previous 2 cycles, you can see that we are now above this trend line, which is very positive. So to keep it simple, if Bitcoin were to go ahead and break back below this range and accept below, all of a sudden, the market is not looking so hot. However, we start consolidating above this range, then we can consider that we will be going much higher. My base case for this cycle is that Bitcoin is not done. We will likely be moving much higher. However, we cannot ignore that some of the signs are starting to show that the market is heating up, and so you want to exercise a little bit of caution. That being said, it really is the last 20% of the market where you can yield some of the most incredible gains, so make sure you're prepared. Next thing I wanted to show you here. Oh, this is just Fartcoin. The reason I look at Fartcoin sometimes is because it tells me if the market really is risk on, and you can see that I was playing around with a potential long setup, holding this 1-hour trend line as support. You can see here that we didn't get a 1-hour close above this candle, but as soon as we did, it did signal a pretty solid trade, and my target for this trade would actually be right around 1.72 if the market can actually hold well. Now, I'm not telling you to trade based on this, but just thought I would share. As per usual, if you want to trade with me, you do have the links in the description down below. You have Bluffin, which is number 2. You get tons of incredible bonuses for joining me on there. If you deposit $2,000, you get $300 back for free for trading. It's one of the best exchanges that I have been using recently. And we also have Weeks, another great bonus. Here, if you deposit $2,000 and sign up with me, you get $400 back for free. And of course, the first link in my description down below does bring you to my free Telegram community where I update the market as things happen outside of my YouTube videos. So back to the charts here. This was just looking at Fartcoin, but if we are to go back, we can consider that there is still the CME gap below these levels. And so if I go back to the Bitcoin range that I've been analyzing, can we move to the bottom of this range? Yes, I do think that it is possible. What I saw this morning on the smaller time frames was that when Bitcoin did go ahead and melt up and again get rejected at the value area high, altcoins were really starting to pick up. However, as soon as Bitcoin had the slightest of corrections on these smaller time frames, as you can see here, altcoins did see a tiny bit of a pullback, but nothing to be concerned about because we are still well within this range. And I know that a lot of you are getting excited specifically about XRP. Now, I've had a lot of people messaging me about XRP because we made a brand new all-time high, but as you can see here, this doesn't look like it's going to be stopping anytime soon. Right now, XRP's all-time high is right around $3.66, and you can see that these bullish candles seem to be continuing. And we talked about XRP in a previous video saying that it did form that double bottom against Bitcoin, which made a very, very strong trade setup. The reason I'm bringing up this double bottom again is to try and help you identify the best possible opportunities in the crypto market. If your altcoin is doing a double bottom against Bitcoin, it's likely that it will also explode up on its USD pair and it will continue to outperform Bitcoin for the foreseeable future. What I mean by this is, of course, Ethereum. I talked about it in yesterday's video, but 2 months ago, I told you that I thought that Ethereum was relatively undervalued and that I was going to start buying some more Ethereum. What you can see is that we did form a massive pivotal double bottom here on the 2019 level, which we tagged all the way back in December of that year. So what this tells us is that Ethereum was getting devalued against Bitcoin for the longest time ever, and now, since finding this bottom, it does look extremely promising. Now, I am actually waiting for a little bit of a pullback here because that will tell me how the altcoin market will be doing, and looking at strong altcoins, that may be the opportunity to go ahead and start accumulating them because, as I shared in my previous video, if I'm going to be invested in the altcoin market, I want to make sure that I'm getting at least better returns than Bitcoin, but also better returns than Ethereum. If I can capture the gains of the altcoin market by simply holding Ethereum, then that is what I will continue to do. So let's see how things develop. Will Ethereum, Bitcoin have a little bit of a pullback, and will the altcoin market struggle? Right here though, what I wanted to really show you is altcoins continue to melt up, as we just talked about earlier in the video. You can see that we exploded past the bull market support band. However, I am not super convinced of this rally because I want to see what happens when Bitcoin has its next big breakout. Will this start going lower? That is the true question here. Now, if we are going to continue higher, there is still way more room for upside. That is what I also need you to understand. So if you're worried and you have a Bitcoin position and you're thinking, man, when is the best time to get into alts? It's always advised to dollar cost average into alts. However, you don't need to worry because you haven't missed most of the move if you were holding Bitcoin. Now, I understand that I get a little bit of flack here because I know that most of you watching my channel were probably knees deep in altcoins. And given my Bitcoin position, that is why I wasn't talking about altcoins that much. But as you can see, for the time being, we're getting a little bit of outperformance from altcoins against Bitcoin. So back to the Bitcoin chart. Let's see what happens here. We are at the point of control. Are we going to keep on bouncing, or are we going to find our way back below to this support level right around 116 to 116.5K? And if that level breaks, because we've been tapping into it several times, at that point, we can go ahead and consider that maybe, just maybe, the CME gap will be tagged before we go ahead and move higher. The market is getting pretty heated. I do need to warn you of that. Now, what else did I want to show you in today's video? Because we do have a lot to cover. Of course, Bitcoin dominance, which we just went over, but what I also wanted to touch on is the total crypto market cap, excluding Bitcoin and Ethereum. You can see here that we are now approaching the highs, which were set right over here, which is around $1.15 trillion. Are we going to break that level of the cycle? The answer is yes, in my opinion, and we can likely move much, much higher, but I don't think that the time is right now. Let's see how things develop. As you know, I take a more cautious approach to the market, but if you want more daily active trades, you do have the first link in my description down below, which brings you directly to my free signals group. And something else to show you here is that, of course, the total crypto market cap, including Ethereum and Bitcoin, just made a new all-time high last week, and it seems like we're not going to stop anytime soon. Can we come back down and consolidate? Of course, that is always a possibility, but as you know, Bitcoin determines the rest of the market. So if Bitcoin just keeps on consolidating and then we go ahead and move much, much higher and then consolidate again, Altcoins will go absolutely parabolic at that point in time. I am waiting for Bitcoin's next big move. Next thing I wanted to show you. Today I woke up and this news came out. Trump media buys $2 billion worth of Bitcoin for its treasury. And while this is happening, you guessed it, Michael Saylor and Strategy are buying some more Bitcoin. He acquired 6,220 Bitcoins for around $740 million at an average price of just under 119K per Bitcoin. So right here, his average price is sitting right around $71,777 with an average gain of 64% all time. He now holds just under $72 billion worth of Bitcoin. That is a lot of Bitcoin. Talk about conviction. And what I also wanted to show you is that while I'm recording this video, the S&P 500 did surge to new record highs and is now officially up over 30% since the April 2025 low. We have just witnessed one of the best 3-month runs in stock market history. And as the S&P 500 puts in its new all-time high and Bitcoin just continues to consolidate here, chilling within this range, what we do have is something to consider. And that is the fact that as long as Bitcoin continues to trade above its previous all-time high, we're likely to see much more upside. Let me just refer to Dan Crypto's analysis here because I thought it really put things in perspective. Basically, as long as we're above the all-time high, this range is likely going to be a continued breakout after the 8-month correction and consolidation range. The current move above the previous high sits just at a little over 10%, which is very minor after such a long range. Every other breakout this cycle moved between roughly 40 to 50% over the months following a longer consolidation. Not saying this is guaranteed to be the same, but I do think we should generally see higher over 2025 as long as this doesn't deviate back down into the range. And to put things very, very simply, back down into the range would put us back below $112,000. We don't want to see Bitcoin back below those levels. Just warning you of the downside if that were to happen. Right now, though, this is still looking pretty positive as Bitcoin just continues to consolidate and altcoins are starting to pick up steam. I'm waiting for that next big breakout, really excited for it. Let's see what happens for Bitcoin. Next thing here, Treasury Secretary Bessent calls for a review of the entire Federal Reserve. And as this came out, Congresswoman Anna Paula Luna files criminal referral against Federal Chair Jerome Powell with the DOJ. And what are they trying to charge him for? He was referred essentially accused of lying under oath about renovations. Luna alleges Powell falsely downplayed the project's $600 million cost increase and denied luxury features like a VIP dining room and rooftop garden. Powell denies the claims and has launched a probe into the renovation costs. Perjury carries up to 5 years in prison. Trump allies have pushed for Powell's removal, and to be fair, so have Trump. But Trump also said it's highly unlikely he would fire him before his term ends in 2026. Let's see what happens. It seems like every single video, Trump says something new about Fed Chair Jerome Powell, and of course, these investigations seem a little bit suspicious. Next thing I wanted to show you, which is very interesting and telling us that the market has heated up and that we are seeing a little bit more risk, and that is the fact that there is a 30% change in the last 24 hours as total NFT sales volume reached $50 million. And as you can see on this chart, the total NFT market cap continues to soar. And so this could be a signal for risk on. Something else I wanted to show you is that people are still trying to short from here. Now, of course, over the 30-day time frame, Bitcoin is looking heated with all of the longs in the market. However, this can extend for much longer than most people think. And if we take a look at the 1-day time frame, you can see that there is a total average of cumulative long liquidation leverage and cumulative short liquidation leverage. If we go on the 7-day time frame, there's actually same thing, very, very even, which is what we want to see. At this point in time, as Bitcoin consolidates, if we want to see further upside, you want more and more people to start piling into shorts so we can ideally go ahead and grab some of that liquidity. That being said, there is cause for a little bit of caution here because yes, over the 30-day time frame, there are still way more longs in the market. So make sure you're managing your positions accordingly as Bitcoin will likely grab some liquidity lower before it goes ahead and moves higher within this range. Something else I wanted to show you that the market is really heating up is taking a look at the dominance by interest. I don't think that I've showed this chart on the channel before, but basically you can see that others, which is the rest of the crypto market excluding Ethereum and Bitcoin, is starting to spike up. And every single time that we do get a significant peak in the market, that is typically when it gets very, very frothy, first of all, for altcoins, but we do see Bitcoin start to have a little bit of a correction. So right now, as I'm recording this video, for open interest, you can see that this amounts to around $36 billion for others and just under $40 billion for Bitcoin. Keep your eyes on this chart. It is on the website called Coin Analyze. And so if you want to track this, I would highly recommend going there. Basically, if this starts exploding to the upside and altcoins get even more relief, at this point, you can likely expect some kind of local top in the market. Not calling for the market to be over, but this usually tells us when things are starting to get a little bit heated. And last thing I wanted to talk about here is actually a tweet by Jason Pizzino. The reason I'm bringing this up is because you'll see more and more people get extremely bullish, and they have every right to do so as Bitcoin continues to consolidate above its previous all-time high. However, when you start to see more and more people talking about this, it's telling us that we are approaching the end of the cycle. I think that we might have up until the end of the year at the very most, until we actually enter a brutal bear market. Now, with all of the institutional interest in the market, I do think that the bear market crash will be far less significant than the previous ones, but I wouldn't be surprised if we still see at least a 65 to 70% correction across the entire asset class. Bitcoin, of course, leading the way, and altcoins getting absolutely annihilated in the bear market, that is. So this tweet basically is what people repeat on Twitter whenever we start seeing some more heated price action. Bitcoin is digital gold. Ethereum is digital money. Wait until the billionaires buy Bitcoin. ETH is going to $1 million by 2030. This one is funny because I do remember showing you in my Telegram community that some guys on Twitter here are already calling for a $25,000 to $30,000 Ethereum this cycle. I mean, guys, come on, you have to be careful who you're following. Bitcoin will hit $1 million this cycle. You only need 0.01 Bitcoin to retire. 1 ETH will make you a millionaire. Super cycle. We're still early, which, by the way, we are not. We are at the latter stages of this market, and just hodl. Well, you don't want to be hodling your shitcoins in the bear market. That is for sure. I've made that mistake in previous cycles. Trust me, you don't want to repeat it. And so, if you already got some extremely solid entries on some of the altcoins that you've been holding for a very long time, because I know that some of you messaged me saying that you're deep into altcoins since basically last year, if they start to outperform and you do see some significant upside in those altcoins, I would highly recommend dollar cost averaging out of those altcoins. That way, you basically get the upside in case it keeps on going up, but you've secured some of your profits, as many people knees deep in altcoins seem to forget before the bear market. And that sums up today's video. They're trying to charge Jerome Powell, Bitcoin is consolidating, but altcoins are starting to see some outperformance as Bitcoin continues to consolidate. I'm still taking a look at the ETH Bitcoin chart to guide me in terms of how this altcoin market will perform, but right now, as Bitcoin stays within this range, if we keep on staying here for the next few days or even weeks and keep on getting that compression, altcoins will likely continue to outperform. If you enjoyed the content, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you in tomorrow's video.